Hello Bloomington, I'm Mayor Tim Busse, and this is the Council Minute for the week of June 12th. We are 1 week away from a decision by the Bureau of International Expositions regarding Expo 2027. As I'm sure you know, Bloomington is one of 5 locations across the globe in the running to host Expo 2027. The vote will take place in Paris on Wednesday, June 21st. The General Assembly of the BIE will start at about 9:30 a.m. Paris time, which puts it at about 2:30 in the morning here. And my guess is that after the final presentations by all of the candidate countries and the distribution of voting credentials, it will be somewhere between 5 and 6 a.m. here in Bloomington when the voting officially starts. The process is 1 vote per country in a secret ballot. If no candidate gets 2/3 of the vote in that first round, the 5th place finisher in the voting will be removed and a second vote will take place. The same scenario happens in the second round of voting, and if it goes to a 3rd round, a candidate only needs a simple majority to win. So it's kind of like ranked choice voting. The last couple of weeks of this effort have been intense. I've heard directly from Senator Amy Klobuchar and Governor Tim Walz that they have been making personal phone calls to ambassadors who have ties to Minnesota. President Biden is working hard on this as well, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken is hosting a reception of ambassadors from BIE countries in Washington this week. This is a national effort with huge local implications. As you've probably noticed, I've been traveling quite a bit lately, going to meetings and conferences in support of the Expo bid. I've missed a couple of council meetings, which I really don't like to do, but I know that the council does a great job getting the work done and that staff keeps things plugging along. The travel I've been doing these last couple of months can be divided into 2 different buckets. The first bucket is the short-term campaign work needed to win the Expo bid, and the second bucket is all about the big picture, long-term economic development goals of the city of Bloomington. The first bucket is the simple acknowledgement that in order to win the Expo bid, we need the support of about 80 BIE member countries. We need their votes. And in the home stretch of any campaign, the Get Out the Vote effort is critical. The most recent trip to Boston and the Bio International Convention was a good example. The Bio Conference is massive. It filled the Boston Convention Center and more than 14,000 people attended. We were there with the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, Destination Medical Center in Rochester, and Greater MSP, all there to promote Minnesota and Bloomington to the bio industry. We knew that in addition to the hundreds of booths promoting bio-related businesses and the dozens of booths sponsored by state economic development agencies, there were booths sponsored and staffed by specific countries. So City Manager Jamie Verbrugge and I spent the better part of one day going to the booths of France, Germany, Mexico, Poland, and other countries talking about Expo. Many of the people staffing those booths have access to high-level leaders in their country, and a good number actually staff their country's pavilion at Expos. Some people ask if this is really worth it, and here's what I'll say. In the 3 successful campaigns that I've run, people appreciate it when you knock on their door and talk to them face to face. A phone call or an email isn't the same thing. A person-to-person connection matters, and that's what we tried to do. The second bucket, related to Bloomington's big picture, long-term economic development goals, it's similar but it's slightly different. Rather than a transactional kind of thing where I would ask for a vote, this is more along the lines of business development, where I was actively cultivating a relationship that will hopefully pay off in the long run. It's about creating opportunities for the future. If you recall, I've said in the past that the 3-month run of the Expo will be a great boon for the Bloomington hospitality industry. Building out the site will be a fantastic jolt for every single trade in the Minnesota construction industry. It's estimated that the Expo will generate $364 million in federal, state, and local tax revenue, and will support more than 17,000 jobs here in Minnesota. That is all great. But here in Bloomington, we've always looked at this as a long-term economic development opportunity. A chance to build out and develop areas that right now are surface parking lots that are literally right next door to MSP Airport and the freeway and in the heart of the growing South Loop. I truly believe that hosting Expo 2027 would be transformative for Bloomington and the entire state of Minnesota. By this time next week, we'll know if we're the hosts. The other item I want to talk about today is a property acquisition that was discussed at the council meeting last week. The property in question is the Marriott Hotel along 494, right next to where the old Thunderbird Hotel was located. The agenda item last Monday was a request that the City Council approve up to $12 million from the South Loop Development Fund as one of the funding sources for the purchase. There was a spirited discussion about the process behind the property acquisition, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. You've heard me say before, the Bloomington Port Authority was created to deliver orderly real estate development and economic development throughout the city. They've been doing a great job for 3 decades. The port, of which I'm a member, has been talking about acquiring the Marriott property since 2018. And it's obvious why. This property is right on the freeway and next door to Mall of America. Buying this property would mean the opportunity to shape the development of a very high-profile parcel. When the Port Authority talked about buying the property, the meeting was held in a closed session. It's legal to do, and frankly, it makes sense. Talking about a negotiation strategy in public is not good business strategy. It's also important to note that the governing agency responsible for the acquisition is the only one allowed to be in the room during a closed meeting discussion. City council members couldn't be part of that closed session discussion because they aren't members of the Port Authority. Councilmember Carter and I were in the closed session because we are members of the Port Authority. So the Port Authority went into closed session and talked about the pros and cons of the idea. It was a very good discussion. And ultimately, the Port recommended to enter into negotiations to buy the parcel. Again, it's an idea that's been in the works for more than 5 years. I do want to acknowledge that the timing of the project made the discussion more challenging. People wanted more time to digest the details. But the timing was critical, and the council made the decision to move forward with a recommendation. I also want to point out that while this purchase could be very helpful as part of an Expo site, I have no doubt that the city and the Port Authority would have moved forward with this proposed purchase even without Expo 2027. It's a strategic investment in a vital corridor and positions us for success. And we've been talking about it since 2018. So, in summary, an opportunity presented itself after 5 years of discussions and deliberations. The Port Authority and the City Council have both weighed in on the path forward, and we're excited about the opportunity to redevelop this site. That will do it for this week's Council Minute. Thanks much for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe, Bloomington.